Hello, Legend of the Samurai here with the Mul-T-Lock MT5+. This is their flagship high-security offering. It has 5 of their usual pin-in-pin tumblers. It adds the interactive alpha spring, which needs to be overlifted out of the keyway. And it also has a sidebar, which couples with 5 sliders that have false gates. So this is a normally very difficult lock to pick, and most of the trouble stems from this sidebar. The actual main pin stacks are standard pins. There's a little bit of spooling on the inner drivers, but in this lock there aren't any matched counter milling on the key pins. So that's pretty straightforward. The alpha element is straightforward once you know how to deal with it, but these sliders, the main difficulty there is where they are in the keyway. So on the bottom here we have the main pin stacks, and directly opposite them we have the sliders, and they are springless. So if I tap that sideways, now you can see they're off to the left. So they slide back and forth freely, and because they have false gates, that means you need to do gate testing. So in order to do that, you apply tension when you have the sliders binding, and then you wiggle the sliders back and forth. And if they're in a false gate, they have very little range of motion, and if they're in a true gate, they move back and forth. Normally that means you need to push the slider in both directions, which means you need control of both sides of it. And getting a tool in there to actually control both sides of those when they need to be able to be entirely in between the other pin stacks is a challenge. However, I have found something of a workaround to that. It will only work on locks that have the sliders binding before the main pin stacks, but I've asked around and this is fairly common on these locks. So here's the key, it works. As we pull this out, the sliders are all reset to the middle position. The trick uses a core shim. So I'm just going to put that in over the main pin stacks. Oh, come on. Sometimes it needs help. There we go. So that's just loosely sitting on top of the main pin stacks, and I'm going to take a tension bar and wedge it down. What has happened is all of the main pins are now overlifted out of the keyway. And normally this would be a problem because you'd go in and you'd set the sliders, and then all of your main pins would be overset. And if they had put springs on the sliders, when you release tension to let the main pins come back, everything would reset. But because they are springless, they will not move. So I'm just going to go in with the back of a half diamond and shift everything over to the left to start. And now, because I have an unobstructed keyway, I can just go in with a normal slider pick. So it has a little groove on the end, little bend. So I will go in, find the first one, and it rattles a little bit, find the second one, bound up, check the next gate, bound up, there, it's loose, find the third one, it seems loose, fourth one is bound, that's loose, and the fifth one, where did you go? Alright, 5 is loose. Four is loose, 3 is good. 2 seems good. 1 is good. So I'll keep tension on the plug and pull that shim out. But now I can let the pins come back out. I can completely remove the tension wrench if I want, replace it. And then I'll go in with a half diamond, see if I can set that alpha. Click, it's nice and set, and now we'll go to the main pin stack. Click on 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 are loose. They're on 2 and 3. Bit of core rotation on 5. 3, nice deep falset. Inner on 2, and we're open. All right, so there we are. Lock back up. Grab a tray. So, one other thing that the MT5 Plus specifically is notorious for is bricking during gutting. And that's because there's a couple of features in here that are pitfalls, shall we say. So we have our drivers going straight up. Over here, we have a ball bearing for anti-drill protection. Down here, we have our sidebar. Right below the keyway, we have the openings for the sliders, and then we have the open keyway. Over between the keyway and the top of the drivers, there's actually just a clean surface. And the fit on this plug in the housing means I can't actually get a shim in there. So I have to make use of that safe spot. So I'll go over a little bit. Make sure my follower is over the drivers. And then there's 2 things that want to leave as this comes out. One is this ball bearing, just in a hole over there. And the other is the sidebar. Show that. And then we'll carefully get those springs out of there. And now we can take out pin stacks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Come on. And then this last one, the alpha driver, or the alpha key pin, sorry. It has this little post that extends through a hole in the plug and interacts with that alpha spring. So it's a very small target to reach, but you don't ever have very far to lift it. And then for the sliders, they're over here. And so you can see this first one is actually full left, and the second one is full right. It's got no further room to move over. So they are lined up, and then as I withdraw the key, they settle back down. 2 of these gates do not need to be moved, or 2 of the sliders are fully left on the true gate. So here's one of the sliders. They have 6 little false gates milled. One of them will be much deeper for the true gate, and the 2 on the very ends are outside of the limits of travel. So those don't actually interact. There appear to be 4 positions where the true gate can actually be. Alright, and then for the plug itself, if you can see that light ring there, that is not actually a groove, that is over milling. So it is ever so slightly wider at that point. So nothing can actually catch there, but it is a second step, so it makes these standard drivers act somewhat like T-pins, which is why I needed to pick most of them twice. And there's the ball bearing drill protection, sidebar, a couple other little bits of drill protection, and then here is the smooth surface we used for gutting. Alright, take the drivers out. So here's one of the standard driver pins, and you can see that light spooling of the inner. On some locks, although it seems entirely random, there will be a matched countermilling on the inside of the key pin, but none of mine have that. Oh, and one other thing to take out, there is this little crescent of drill protection at the front. Here's the alpha element driver. It is spooled, although that doesn't really come into play very much because it sits so high in the plug that it's already pretty much at the wider diameter at the bottom. Here's our last driver. So, nothing special about the housing, other than the drill protection and the fact that they have pressed ball bearings into the pin chambers to close them, so drilling those out isn't really an option. You might be able to mill them out if you needed to recover a bricked lock, but in these Euro profiles, that is not an easy thing to do. Go close on these. So we have all of our drivers, all of our inner and outer key pins, alpha element, our sliders, sidebar, springs. So, there you have it. That is the Mul-T-Lock MT5 Plus. It is a very fun lock to pick, and if you have sliders that bind before your main pin stack, you can use a core shim to give yourself all the space you could ever want to deal with them with a normal slider pick. If your lock doesn't have the sliders bind first, check both directions, because sometimes that matters. But otherwise, there are other pretty well-known techniques, like the visual method or using a sharp probe to not interact with the post, but actually the other edge of the slider. So, all in all, a very fun lock to pick. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.